Hello, comrades, and welcome to another video on the Chinese Revolution area of Study 2. This will make up a short series of videos on, this is the first video, I should say, in a short series of videos on the Cultural Revolution, or the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. This is a huge topic in the area of study, and it's sort of it's the final topic that we're going to explore. It ran from 1966 to 1976 with Mao's death, but the key parts of the Cultural Revolution were really in the first 3 or so years, so 1966 to 69. So we're looking here at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution. And here is a quote from Mao. He said, "Capitalist roaders are power holders who follow the capitalist road. They do not take the socialist road, but they now hold power." So Mao is clearly alluding to Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who, after the economic reforms that Liu Shaoqi brought in after the Great Leap Forward, Mao accused him of being a capitalist roader. So let's get into it. First, it's important that we look at Jiang Qing, who is a key knowledge point in the study design, and was an important figure during the Cultural Revolution. So a little bit about Jiang Qing. First of all, she was Mao's wife, Mao's fourth wife, which I'll explain shortly. However, let's go through her sort of rise to prominence. So in 1933, Jiang Qing became a member of the CCP Youth League. She was an actress and was involved in theater. But after the Japanese invasion of China in 1937, she left her stage and film career to, quote, join the revolution. In August 1937, she arrived in Yan'an at the Yan'an Soviet and gained a position in the film office of the CCP propaganda department, so using some of her skills in film to help with the propaganda of the CCP. She began a relationship with Mao in 1938, and they married in November of 1938. Party leadership agreed to the marriage as long as she kept out of politics. And that agreement, or that deal sort of lasted for over 20 years. But then in the early 1960s, Mao encouraged Jiang to play a greater public and political role, particularly investigating popular culture and creative arts and looking for possible revisionist or capitalist tendencies within the arts. So during the Cultural Revolution, Jiang Qing, as a member of the Gang of Four, encouraged the radicalism of the Red Guard movement, which we'll explain shortly. She also became the patron of the 8 revolutionary model operas, which were a form of propaganda during through theater during the Cultural Revolution. And she influenced artistic censorship during the Cultural Revolution. She was ruthless and ambitious, and she gained a place on the CCP Politburo in 1969. So Jiang Qing is a significant figure, and we will explain a bit more about her in a future video. So when we're looking at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, the first place to look, I mean, you could look at, there are multiple long-term causes of the Cultural Revolution. However, I suppose short-term trigger is a play, weirdly, called Hai Rui Dismissed from Office. Now, it was written by Wu Han, a Beijing historian, and it was a play about the career and downfall of Hai Rui, a 16th century official who dared to voice criticisms against the Jiang emperor. Hai Rui in the play was removed from office and sentenced to death, though his sentence was commuted when the emperor died first. When it was first performed in January 1961, so 5 years before the Cultural Revolution, many interpreted interpreted it as an allegory about the downfall of former defense minister Peng Dehuai. Like Hai Rui, Peng had dared to criticize Mao. If we look at comparisons, look at similarities, Mao takes the place of the emperor in the play, and Peng Dehuai had paid for it with his career and reputation. Mao didn't think much of this interpretation. He didn't really see an issue with it. So for a few years, even though many had made this interpretation, not a whole lot happened as a result of this play. However, in 1965, Mao traveled to Shanghai and met with Jiang Qing and her associates Yao Wenyuan and Zhang Chungqiu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those correctly, who are both future members of the Gang of Four. Under Mao and Jiang's direction, in late 1965, Yao Wenyuan wrote a scathing review of the play. He is quoted as saying, "Hai Rui dismissed is not a fragrant flower, but a poisonous weed." So revisiting some of the language of the 100 Flowers campaign. Yao said, "If we do not clean it up, it will harm the people's cause." So Hai Rui dismissed from office is certainly an early sort of a trigger of the Cultural Revolution, if you will. So in January 1965, Mao was urging a cultural revolution, sort of a continuation of the socialist education movement and some of the emulation campaigns. So the Politburo set up a 5-man group led by Beijing Mayor Peng Zhen to review anti-socialist attitudes in fields like history, philosophy, literature, law, and dramatics. On top of the list of tasks for the 5-man group was investigating the creator of Hai Rui dismissed from office, Wu Han. Now, in November 1965, I should note that Peng Zhen was an ally of Wu Han's. Wu Han served under Peng Zhen in Beijing. And so he wasn't readily investigating or deeply investigating Wu Han, or he was trying to skirt around and avoid investigating him seriously. So after almost a year, in November 1965, disappointed by the lack of action by the 5-man group, Mao ordered state newspapers to publish Yao's review of Hai Rui in its entirety. Peng Zhen, believing this risked turning what he believed to be an academic debate into a political confrontation, attempted to block the publication, but was overruled by Zhou Enlai. Wu Han, as a result, offered a self-criticism on the 30th of December 1965, but this didn't bring an end to the 5-man group's investigations. And so Mao pressed the 5-man group to offer a clear judgment of what should happen to Wu Han. On the 12th of February 1966, Peng's 5-man group released what's called its February Outline Report. I don't know why I struggle with the word February, which acknowledged the existence of bourgeois and reactionary sentiments in culture. The solution, it said, was to, going back to an old quote of Mao, seek truth from facts, to fight bourgeois ideas with better socialist ideas. Mao refused to read the February Outline Report, which may not seem like a big deal, but it showed his dissatisfaction with the 5-man group's efforts in investigating anti-socialist attitudes. So on the 3rd of January 1965, Liu Shaoqi was reconfirmed as president. He was very much seen as Mao's chosen successor, and it was widely assumed that he was. Newspaper headlines at this time proclaimed, "Chairman Mao and Chairman Liu are both our beloved leaders." Feeling no threat to his authority, in March 1966, Liu went on a month-long diplomatic tour of Burma, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. While he was gone, Mao started making some moves. He demanded that the party leadership withdraw the February outline report and dissolve Peng Zhen's five-man group. He claimed, "For a long time, I have begged the local authorities to rebel against the Central Committee if those in power have not done their job. I call upon the local provinces for a rebellion and an attack on the center." So this is a direct call for the masses, and or at least uh, yeah, for the masses and peasants to and provincial cadres to rebel against the Central Committee. Now, when Liu Shaoqi returned in late April, he was met, unsurprisingly, after Mao's proclamation, with a political storm. On the 4th to the 18th of May, there was a Central Committee meeting, which was unattended by Mao, who was at his Hangzhou summer retreat. Lin Biao, sort of speaking on Mao's behalf, as well as Kang Sheng, who was the head of the secret police, accused Peng Zhen of planning a military coup. So Peng Zhen, remember, being the Beijing mayor who led the five-man group. And on the 16th of May, the radicals in the party, including Lin Biao and Kang Sheng, released a document drafted by Mao called the May 16th Circular. Now, the May 16th Circular is really the key document that launched the Cultural Revolution. It did four main things. It announced the end of Peng Zhen's five-man group, announced the formation of a new Cultural Revolution small group headed by Jiang Qing, Chen Boda, Zhang Chunqiao, and Kang Sheng. The May 16th Circular also charged Peng and three other members of the five-man group with counter-revolutionary sympathies and purged them from the CCP, and also called on loyal party members to, quote, thoroughly criticize and repudiate reactionary bourgeois ideas in the sphere of academic work, education, journalism, literature, art, and publishing. So it was a direct call for party members to fight back against perceived reactionary or bourgeois or anti-socialist ideas in all spheres of life, really. Mao, in his May 16th Circular, strategically failed to directly name who was the target of the Cultural Revolution. However, within the May 16th Circular, he referenced successes, which suggested that Liu Shaoqi was a key target. Now, the May 16th Circular generated a great deal of excitement and discussion among students who would eventually become the Red Guards. Now, we're going to look at the Red Guards over 2 slides, but we'll also look at them in a further video because they were a key group within the Cultural Revolution, and they're also a key knowledge point in the study design. On May 24th, so 8 days after the release of the May 16th Circular, a dazibao, otherwise known as a big character poster, which you can see here, these are examples of dazibaos, appeared on the walls at Beijing University, urging students to rebel against their teachers and lecturers with the heading, "What are you up to in the Cultural Revolution?" Quickly, other big character posters appeared all over universities, and particularly Beijing University. So over 65,000 dazibao went up at Beijing University alone. Seeing these big character posters, students of a middle school attached to Beijing University started using the term Red Guards to describe their radical student group. On the 18th of June, the government postponed university entrance exams and suspended middle school classes to allow more time for Red Guard activities. So Mao was really in favor of the Red Guards taking action against reactionary teachers and intellectuals. This was really an expression of both political activism as well as teenage rebellion. According to one former Red Guard, quote, "We were free to do as we pleased. Nobody checked on us and we controlled ourselves. It was a great deal of fun." So imagine you as a, 16, 17, 18-year-old living in Beijing and feeling particularly rebellious. And you are, this is after thousands of years of having to respect your elders and be really respectful according to Confucian values. And now all of a sudden you're being encouraged through these big character posters to rebel against authority and rebel against intellectuals and elders. It was a very appealing call to action for many of these students. So by mid-June, Red Guards were becoming increasingly violent. Students at Beijing University would seize members of the administration, place dunce caps on their heads, like you can see here, splattered them with ink, ripped their clothes, and made them kneel while being beaten. One observer remarked, "A red terror spread over the campus, and the revolutionary teachers and students were filled with joy." Now, Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who were worried by the escalating turmoil, responded to the student unrest by sending work teams of party activists to university campuses to restrain the Red Guards and restore order. Mao wanted chaos. He really he wanted to encourage the Red Guard movement, not hold it back at this point. So he was furious with Liu's work teams as they were restricting his mass revolutionary movement. Now, remember that at this point, Mao, since May, Mao had been away at his summer retreat. And so he'd been, even though he had drafted the May 16th circular that had launched the Cultural Revolution, and he was, keeping an eye on things from afar in terms of what the Red Guards were doing, he had been out of the limelight for a little while. So on the 16th of July, 1966, Mao ended this months-long period of public seclusion with his famous, quote, "good swim in the Yangtze River at Wuhan," pictured here. So you can see Mao here. Over 10,000 spectators lined the riverbank to cheer the chairman, and newspapers all celebrated and reported the good news. Despite his age of 72 and his somewhat portly frame, Mao spent more than an hour floating down the Yangtze. The good swim demonstrated to the public that Mao was in good health and ready to retake control of the government, which helped to strengthen his personality cult. You often see things like this, even today. It sounds ridiculous, but that, going for a swim might show someone to be ready to take control of the government. But you see government leaders all the time trying to demonstrate and get media attention on how fit they are physically, because people see that and they think, well, they're physically fit, so surely they're mentally fit as well. And so this was really an opportunity for Mao to spread propaganda about himself and to strengthen his cult of personality. Historian Jiang Qing Fairbank is quoted as saying, "Since rural Chinese generally could not swim, and few adventurers had ever tried the Yangtze, this was like news that Queen Elizabeth II had swum the Channel." The English Channel, that is. He was obviously a paragon of athleticism, capable of superhuman feats. So that's how he was seen by the public at this point, due to his good swim. Now, 2 days later, on the 18th of July, 1966, Mao returned to Beijing, failing to notify Liu Shaoqi that he was back. He refused to see the president, and on the 25th of July, a week after he returned, Mao ordered the work teams to withdraw from universities, allowing the Red Guards to continue with their cultural revolutionary activities. From the 1st to the 8th of August 1966, so early August, a Central Committee plenum reviewed Mao's ideological and political program and approved a document known as the 16 Points, which outlined the nature and goals of the Cultural Revolution. Now, I'll read you a little bit from the 16 points. We will look at it in more detail in class, but I'll read you some of the points. So it says, at present, our objective is to struggle against and overthrow those persons in authority who are taking the capitalist road. Guess who he's referring to there? Since the Cultural Revolution is a revolution, it inevitably meets with resistance. It tempers the proletariat and other working people, and especially the younger generation, teaches them lessons and gives them experience. Put daring above everything else. Boldly arouse the masses. Trust the masses. Rely on them and respect their initiative. Make the fullest use of big character posters and great debates, and expose all the ghosts and monsters. When there is debate, it should be conducted by reasoning, not by coercion or force. In certain schools, some persons in charge have organized counterattacks against the masses. This is an error and absolutely impermissible. The period of schooling should be shortened, courses should be fewer and better. Although the bourgeoisie has been overthrown, it is still trying to use old ideas, culture, customs, and habits of the exploiting classes to corrupt the masses. So referring to what I'll talk about in my next video, the Four Olds. The Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution is bound to achieve brilliant victory under the leadership of the Central Committee of the party, headed by Comrade Mao Zedong. So the 16 points, even though the May 16th circular had sort of launched the Cultural Revolution, the 16 points gave it a bit more direction. The plenum, the Central Committee plenum, also appointed Lin Biao first vice chairman of the Central Committee, making him second in charge under Mao. Lin was Mao's quote, closest comrade in arms, while Liu Shaoqi was demoted to 8th position in the Politburo hierarchy. Now, by the end of July, the Red Guards boasted more than 1 million members in Beijing alone, so this movement was growing rapidly. They looked to Mao for inspiration and direction. So on the 1st of August, the first day of the plenum, Mao penned a letter to the Red Guards at Beijing University, offering them his approval and support. On the 5th of August, 1966, Mao pinned his own big character poster on the door to the Central Committee meeting room. It was titled, "My First Big Character Poster, Bombard the Headquarters." This was printed in all major newspapers the next day. Now, I'll talk about this in more detail in my next video, the Bombard the Headquarters movement and campaign. But as the name suggests, it encouraged Red Guards to attack corrupt cadres and also CCP leaders. So on the 18th of August, 1966, Mao appeared before a rally of Red Guards in Tiananmen Square. He attended several similar rallies over the coming weeks, and at each one, the Red Guards were encouraged to attack the four olds, those being old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. In September, Red Guards literally bombarded the headquarters of provincial officers, seized cadres, and put them through struggles at denunciation rallies. Now, that sort of brings us through the beginning of the Cultural Revolution. Our next video will look at some of the key revolutionary forces and some of the key targets of the Cultural Revolution. Now, to summarize, Mao Zedong had long wanted a campaign against anti-socialist and anti-CCP criticisms in art and literature. In 1965, he convinced the Politburo to set up a 5-man group to examine instances of this. In 1961, so a few years earlier, a play called Hai Rui, Dismissed from Office, was interpreted as an allegorical criticism of Mao and his purging of Peng Dehuai in 1959. This play was attacked in a review by Yao Wenyuan. The 5-man group led by Peng Dehuai, Peng Zhen, tried to block publication of Yao's essay and other similar pieces, which infuriated Mao. In May 1966, the group was replaced by a clique of Mao loyalists, the Cultural Revolution Small Group, and in that Cultural Revolution Small Group was Mao's wife, Jiang Qing. Then in May to August 1966, Mao used rhetoric and propaganda to urge militant students to assemble and bombard the headquarters, forcing reactionary and bourgeois figures from positions of authority. As these militant students, the Red Guards, swelled in number, Mao appeared before a series of rallies in August to October. He wore their uniform and symbols and urged them to destroy the four olds. So that's sort of the beginning of the Cultural Revolution. I will see you for the next video, but I hope that you found this one informative and interesting. And yep, I'll see you next time.